A little rusty at this. I haven't done this in a while. All right, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of Parker X. It's been a little while, and I think we've dubbed this one Parker X Rides Again. Once again, you've got Brett, and Lester. And today we thought we would have a conversation about kind of where we're going to take this thing and what we're going to do next, because I think it's ready for a little bit of a refresh.
Yeah, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be back in the saddle. Yeah.
So
I just can't wait for conferences to start.
I cannot either. I've been doing the, today was the first day of IPMI's Mobility and Innovation Summit, and I think it's going to be one of their last virtual ones. They may do some like one-off stuff, but they've announced that they're doing their big live in person in December, PIEs in July. There's a ton of regionals. I cannot wait to go back and be around parking people again.
Yeah, there's only so much home improvement you can do, right? You need to get back out and travel.
That's right.
I think we've learned a few things, though, about how work can be done remotely over the course of at least the last 12 months. So we can still be productive. We can still cater to probably an increased load of business just based on being available via video conferences and not having to travel as a default position.
I've just gotten
that is
really
right.
used to not wearing like suits and wearing t-shirts and shorts to work all the time. You can get pretty used to that.
I think my biggest problem is going to be putting shoes back on. Like I've been barefoot for a year now, so putting the shoes back on is going to be tough.
That's good.
I had to wear a suit yesterday. It felt so weird. It was so uncomfortable.
We're all invested in Brett's business because he started it during the middle of the pandemic. So it might be
No. I started it 2 days before the pandemic. Like
yes.
we launched in February. We went public in March, and then the next day they were like, "Well, don't leave your house for a year." So, yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was 2 weeks to stop the spread.
That's what they said.
Yeah,
and
that's where it started.
It's been a really long 2 weeks.
Long 2 weeks. So I thought it was an interesting topic to like think about where we wanted to go with this next and where to take it next. I mean, I think it'd just be interesting to start getting. You've been doing some stuff, Brett, with Brett Wood, with the figuring out how they restart their programs, where they go next, what are they going to do differently going forward, and that's incredibly interesting because I think there's going to be things that are just different going forward, not in a bad way either, just different.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I've done a couple things. One, I've been recording a few of these with parking industry folks about kind of how their programs are evolving. And one of them's already out. A couple more are going to come out over the next few weeks. But the other thing is, with IPMI, we've been leading what they call the Roadmap to Recovery, which is kind of a documentation of how the industry has been impacted. And in that was a lot of what we did in 2020. But what we're doing right now is a lot of like how the industry is adapting and what the future holds. And I'm with you. I think it's fascinating. I think our industry's done a really good job of like accepting that things aren't going to be the same and trying to help themselves pivot and serve their communities or campuses or whatever it may be. And so, in 2021, I'm very hopeful that we're not talking about the impacts of COVID anymore. We're talking about the impacts of our colleagues in the industry adapting and evolving and growing and being more than just parking professionals. We're now in the business of like managing everything that's happening and everything that's moving in our communities. So there's some really good topics around that I think we can explore over the next few months.
I think I like the most that customer service also now means self-service and automation, where it was linked to, having people around before, where now it's like, I'm pretty happy just taking care of myself, and I'd prefer to do it that way unless it's required to, to interface in a different way.
Well, it's interesting because like as an industry, we were inching towards that really slowly, right? And then all of this happened and we ran at it like, at a marathon or a sprint pace to get there, right? And we've proven that it works, and we've proven that the customers prefer it. I mean, they'd rather have touchless options, mobile options, the ability to manage their own transactions, which helps our operational costs And in the end, I think it also helps our bottom line because I think revenues get better as we give people better and more flexible options to comply with parking payment and regulations and things like that.
Things have been thrust upon us as an industry, and then we've taken steps to adjust. And I think we're still partway through that. We've done what we can, but there's also been some significant structural changes in the technology, and also the groups that have been traditional leaders in the space. Some of them have fallen away. Talent's moved along. A lot of people got let off, so it's coming back in a different way. There's not as much guarantee of investment, or there wasn't, and now that has changed. People are rushing back into looking at how they're changing their parking dynamics and what they do. So where there was potentially insecurity, Lester was saying you've never been busy. That's not true for everyone. There are groups out there who haven't changed as well because they structurally weren't able to change as well. So that's interesting as well.
Yeah, I think we were already kind of out there kind of pushing the envelope on some, on some ideas and some things that not everyone was quite comfortable with. And then, obviously as soon as all this stuff kicked off, it's like we became instantly popular just because we were already where everybody wanted to be.
I think there's value in that, and there's value in understanding if you're at the cutting edge of that, and what does that mean? And then the guys who come next and next and next, what are they going to do then to meet that? So some of these things fail or aren't quite right when they first come out, and then after that, there's the winning technology or the winning suite for the particular use case that comes through.
I think the hardware that they use to manage parking assets just continues to go away. Like it continues to erode, like the amount of actual physical product that people are buying to do that, and it becomes, it just keeps that footprint keeps shrinking, and it becomes more of a digital environment, and that's the path, right? That's where it's going to go, and we just
closer and closer to the customer, to the user.
Yeah.
Right? So it's
right. I remember having those conversations with people, and it was like, okay, well, especially on the parks vendor side, and it's like, wow, but we're just kind of, by offering this, should we be trying to slow this down because we're, kind of cutting our own throats on this stuff? And it's like, if you don't embrace this technology as it's coming at you and try to be, part of that initial, kind of adoption and kind of acceptance of it, you lose in the end. Like anytime you try to play defense, you're going to lose eventually.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
The metaphor I keep telling people is like, Netflix and Blockbuster were both very viable businesses at one point in the early 2000s. and Netflix saw that, we were going totally online and touchless and frictionless. And Blockbuster said, nah, people are going to keep coming in and buying DVDs and renting DVDs. And there's one of them that's doing really well right now, and the other one's not in business. And so we as an industry have to realize that we may be at a Netflix Blockbuster moment, and we have to adapt.
That's true.
Well, if you're trying to stay Blockbuster, then you'll go the way of Blockbuster. That's for sure.
That is true. Absolutely. So
what happens in those situations? So those companies who try and stick at that, their revenues are under pressure, and then their bottom lines are under pressure, and so they have to lose their expense, and their major expense is their labor and their talent pool. You lose your talent pool, it's a death spiral, to be honest. So, but that's also meant that there are new forms and new competitors in the space, and so it's an interesting time to be a buyer, interesting time to have a look at the economics of how you're running your facility, because you've had to change. Equally, you haven't been able to capture traditionally the same volumes of people coming into your facilities, and now the ones that are returning in a different way. So lots of change right at the moment. I still think we're in the midst of that. So I guess what I'm saying is we'll keep continuing to explore that over the course of this year, because I think this is an important year as we come back.
Well, yeah, I don't think we know what the total outcome is going to be. Like, we're still waiting to see how many people go back to work in a traditional sense versus stay remote. We're still waiting to see the outfall of whether people moved away from cities and moved to places if they could work remotely. And we don't know what's going to happen, but we're slowly inching towards that. Most of America is back open now in some form or fashion, and we're going to see over the next 6 to 8 months how that happens and what our cities, I look at it from the city management side of things, policy, practice, all those types of things. they have to continue to be quick to adapt. One of the things that we really did well through the pandemic was we kind of broke the mold of it takes a city a year to make a change, or we have to go through all these little things and steps to make the change. They just did it to support business, to support community, essential workers, whatever. And we have to keep doing that, whether it's from a technology procurement, policy, operational standpoint, because it's going to change, continue changing even as things get better.
I think there's forced some integration between silos for municipalities as well. So sometimes enforcement was separate from transport. I think that's come together through this, and hopefully those connections build and bond more generally. Also, on-street services, off-street services, those are blending more and more and need to. And I think that's useful for it's certainly the next frontier for in having an integrated experience. You don't care where you park. You have a need to go and park. You want to make sure it's easy, and if you can point to an on-street and off-street solution, then it's not something you need to think about. The better they're integrated, the better it is for everyone. There's an interesting point there that's come through. We've seen a lot of acquisitions. We've seen a lot of strategic partnerships in the last 6 months. Super interesting, because they've pushed then people who want to play together, even if it's on certain select areas and certain select technologies. People have been more willing in this economy to do that just to get something going, and they haven't been as defensive. And I think we've seen some interesting, very interesting relationships form there.
I wonder about some of the acquisitions that have occurred, and just some of them feel like it's not the right direction. Like, taking on a whole bunch of OpEx right now and kind of on the path we're on just seems kind of counterintuitive to kind of the direction the world's kind of heading right now. It seems like we can do a whole lot more with less, and we can do a lot more kind of gig economy stuff and a lot more, subcontracting and renting services versus, bringing more and more people onto your payroll. Like that's another aspect I think that we're seeing. I wonder about some of those acquisitions.
Sometimes capital just needs to find a home, and if you don't use it, you lose it. Yeah. So there's a little bit of that as well. Pump up the.
That's true.
Yeah, there's a whole financial paradigm that's not exactly in line with where the technology or the industry is going, but that sometimes floats out interesting outcomes as well. So,
or maybe where the world's heading, right? Like the direction the world's heading at this point.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I too am looking forward to getting some travel going. I think even international travel, hopefully that will return soon. And I think
when are y'all going to let us come see y'all in Australia? We could come now if you wanted us to, but those 0 cases would go away pretty quick.
You guys can come, just stay in New Zealand for 14 days or so, and then get it out of your system, and then you can come over if you're right. But I think
have any of you guys taken the?
Sorry, go ahead.
Have you taken the antibody test yet?
No,
I have not. No,
I took that just recently, just for fun, because I was at the doctor anyway. So,
were you? Did you have traces? Yeah.
Nope.
Okay.
I would expect the same result if I went and took them, but who knows?
Yeah. I mean, why not? Does that mean I can go to? It means I can't go to Australia. If I'd already had it, then I could go.
You could go. Okay. I don't think we let anyone from the top half of the world in at the moment. That's just how it's working. The so the other areas that are interesting, there's been some countries who haven't been as affected as sort of I want to say the West. We have a look at what's happening in China again. I think that's more interesting to have a look at. There's some interesting technologies coming out there with municipalities looking at facial recognition, temperature, a whole level of interest and control, and how that might influence the parking experience as well. I'm doing some work with casinos who are obviously super interested in facial recognition as well. So that whole space I think is one to watch, because I've already had questions about could we use a camera to identify the driver and use that as the recognition technology. Interesting. I don't know if it's there yet, but it's certainly there are pockets in the world where that is the way it's all going. So again,
I've thought
lean
about
infrastructure.
that. I've thought about that as a technology, and look, I mean, my phone can do it every single day, 100 times a day.
Yeah.
I'm sure it could be done. I don't know if it's very convenient to have to stop, roll down my window, right? Because it's not going to see me through my tinted window, and then look at the column or the terminal until it figures out who I am and then lets me in. I think there's just speed will always win. It's why we talked about that a bunch of times. But speed's going to win, and that seems like it would take longer than almost everything else we're doing.
Well, and from a privacy perspective, I mean, it's taken us forever to get people to accept license plate recognition, and that we're not, mining their data from a license plate. If we start telling people that we're going to use their face as the recognition, I think you're going to see people revolting in America. So, yeah.
Look, it'll start in the airports. It'll start in those places where high security is super important, and we normalize behavior pretty quickly. So, yeah, it's taken a decade for license plates. But I can see it happening. As the technology is there's always that tension around, is the use case meeting the technology? And sometimes it finds a spot, and sometimes it blossoms. It's one of a number of those types of technologies that are coming down the pipe that are interesting to have a look at least.
I said this probably a year ago, and it was kind of an unpopular thing, especially for the companies that were, really focused on their in-car kind of app experience, like teaming up with GM, teaming up with Daimler, and all those.
Lots of that.
Well, now, I mean, all of a sudden, like, the vehicles are coming, they're advertising Apple and Google CarPlay, like Apple CarPlay and Google Car. Like, all of a sudden, that's like the push forward, like they're advertising it going forward. And they're not spending the money. Dodge isn't even spending the money anymore to put their own operating system in there. Like, they expect you to hook your phone up.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but it makes sense. I mean, one of the things we've been telling communities when we, they want a parking app, they want something to, provide them a payment option, real-time availability or navigation to spaces. And we always say, like, why would you ask the people that come to your community to download another app versus just going through Google Maps, which, has 50 billion users a day or more. And now you see it, like, here in the States, and I don't know if it's happening, there, but is. Like, over the past few months, you've seen multiple mobile payment companies now start taking payment through Google Maps, because why try to create something that somebody has to go out and procure if we can just go to the place they're already at?
100%. And I'll never, as much as an Apple user as I am for, like, my phone and stuff, like, that Google experience too is just such a better experience usually.
Yeah.
Google's home address, Lester's home address, if you want to send your Google merchandise, is.
But I love all the Apple stuff. Like, the Apple experience is good, but, like, just some things they have a lock on. Like, the Apple Wallet stuff. I mean, that's another thing that's, no app required, nothing, and you're able to have this, this virtual experience based on a, native functionality that's built into your phone.
Lester's home address to send your Apple merchandise. So what is it as prevalent there as it is here, the QR codes and registering when you walk into a venue? So we've naturalized that behavior universally here, where people have now understood what a QR code is and how to register and how to use it. That's become something that wasn't.
I'd say the most common use here is menus now. There's no menu on the table. There's a QR code on the table. That's kind of the normal thing.
Yeah, okay.
Just like everything else, I think the pandemic has begun to normalize this more than it was beforehand. So, yeah.
I wanted to talk about a couple of things that I found interesting in the meantime. I thought that was interesting. The return of the Uber and other rideshare experiences. Snapdragon and Qualcomm got together on a new platform that they've pulled out to manage those systems. Do you think that that's going to return in the same way? Have you found yourselves going back to that? And anecdotally, I think we'll get some real evidence of that coming over the long term. But what have you found there? We've had just one last point on that. There was a case in the UK where the UK government, not the UK government, a private citizen, an Uber driver, took Uber to court to make them pay a minimum wage, and so it's now formalised what was a gig economy in there, or at least started to edge towards that. It's interesting that disruption's now sort of been regulated, where it was once sort of free, and there's a couple of parallels in that.
California recently overturned legislation that was requiring benefits for Uber drivers and sort of gig economy stuff. So that's actually been overturned in California now.
It's gone the other way.
I think y'all were the only state that even went in that direction. I mean, maybe New York. I'm not sure,
so
but
too.
yeah,
New
we're
Jersey,
state by
I
state
think.
here. Yeah, I mean, so it here in the South, I don't think it's going to happen. We're just going to kind of free market it. But from a return standpoint, like, it's interesting because, you know, at the beginning of the pandemic, there was like this concern around being on transit or being around, you know, other people. But I think people are starting to get that comfort level back. And just anecdotally, here in my neighborhood, I see a lot more Uber trips being taken than there was 8 months ago. I think that may actually come back quicker than people getting on mass transit with loads of other people. Because there is a level of like just perceived safety of being with one other person in a car versus being with 25 people on a bus. So I don't think it's gone forever. They definitely took a hit, but I think they're going to see an uptick.
The fundamental need's still there. Yeah.
Yeah, I've rented more vehicles on the trips that I did, and I think it was more that the Uber and Lyft stuff wasn't nearly as available. Like you'd end up waiting for a while to get a car, or waiting for a ride, especially going from like the airport into DC or something.
That's right.
So
I mean,
it was actually ended up being quicker.
Yeah, the demand went down considerably almost overnight, and so the supply went down as well. A lot of those folks, you know, they transitioned from being Uber drivers to being Uber Eats, Grubhub. I mean, they moved on to the next phase of the gig economy that was booming and still is booming with food delivery, grocery delivery, things like that.
So that's one thing that's gone away. I want to talk about a couple of things that have come in, which are interesting, which is the alternative uses of structures and other elements. Two that I thought were interesting this week was the Singapore Food Agency using the rooftops of 7 of their car park structures as urban farming locations. I thought that was pretty interesting. I don't know if we've seen a lot of other alternative uses come in, but that one's interesting in a sense that paired with solar water reticulation seems like an interesting use for a facility that is not getting the use that it was before.
I just thought you could build some really cool go-kart tracks.
That would be fun.
Inside parking structure.
When I interned with the city of Las Vegas for a week, just for the heck of it, and wrote parking tickets. One night they let me drive the Go Forth through the parking garage, and that thing will go about 35 miles an hour, and I got it up on one wheel. So it would be a lot of fun to do go-kart driving in a parking facility. We're still seeing a lot of like storage, good storage, transitioning to first and last mile mobility. I mean, again, we're not going to see this come to full fruition until people start coming back to work or destinations, but there definitely is a move to kind of make better use of that space.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Reduction in stack parking has just kind of been the easy one. That was like the almost immediate one, right? Instead of having all these people filling up your structure, all these attendants there to stack park all these vehicles and valet all of them. It's like when the demand dropped, all of a sudden you turn it back into a self-park garage.
That's right, yeah.
Service robots in the parking facility. That's interesting. There was an airport. One of the airports came up with a cool, neat design. I'm just looking for that now, and it's a service robot that's supposed to help you interact with changing a tire or monitoring security within the facility. It looks like a drone from Doctor Who, or a robot from a Dalek from Doctor Who going around the facility. That was pretty interesting. And then Volkswagen also released a a robot that would travel around charging your electric vehicle where you parked it, rather than having to park in a particular bay. It was the mobility was in the vehicle, in the robot, to charge you, so it could charge multiple bays, and rather than you have to park in a specific bay. So I thought that was an interesting thing that'll sort of will disrupt, I think, the way we think about EV charging going in the future.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Very clever.
Have to have a hell of a battery in it. Like, it would almost have to go back and recharge itself before it can go back out too, right?
I don't know how it's connected. Maybe there's a gantry and a
port
tray
or something.
I don't know.
That's a really interesting idea, though.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And then, obviously, autonomous vehicles, self-driving, that's coming along. I certainly want to do a little bit more in that area, make it easy to understand where it's at. So I might do a little thing on that. I know we're reaching the end of probably a good episode, a good return episode. There was one that I also thought was interesting, was there's been a couple of people, these stories coming out about people who are sleeping in car parks and sleeping in structures. And through the pandemic, we should just take a moment to remember those people for how they've been, working through that, how they've been making that work. Some really interesting stories about people who've been living in structures for years, using free Wi-Fi, using that. I'm sure there's some interesting tales out there about how people are living that way by choice as university students, and then not by choice. And there's certainly some interesting support and alternative uses around that.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen that, like the kind of van life thing, I guess, or generally, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, they van life. I mean, they tend to go to more remote places than kind of docking in parking garages. But I mean, I could see it. It's cover from inclement weather, and if you're going to an urban area, there's probably no better place to go dock your van than in a car park.
Yeah, you're gonna have EV charging if you need it for free. You're gonna have internet. You're gonna have a bathroom. Everything will be there.
You're guaranteed to get the early bird rate, that's for sure.
Yeah. I think an interesting technology that I saw recently get released by Tesla, SpaceX, they just launched that. It's called Starlink. So for bringing internet to like remote areas, I mean, they're doing like 50 megs per second off a satellite, which is unheard of for satellite, and we're talking like 30 millisecond latency. I mean, it's always been the problem with satellite is latency, and they did a bunch of low orbit satellite launches and are able to kind of, at least in the beta way, are trying to solve that issue. It'll be a big deal for the world.
Yeah, I think Skynet comes online soon.
Yeah, I know.
I've seen that movie. It doesn't end well.
Yeah. No matter how many times they try to change it, it keeps ending poorly.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Parker X podcast. We sincerely appreciate it and hope you are enjoying our content. Please remember to rate, review, comment, subscribe, and share. And follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. The following has been a production of Parker X.